TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
Getting hit over Baghdad with a surface-to-air missile was not something I ever expected. Every bit of training, all the hard things that you've done in your life lead you to this one moment. And I feel like, for me, that really reinforced this idea of, preparation and putting in the work, because you never know when your moment is going to be.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today. It is a beautiful day here in North Carolina, and we finally got some relief from the heat, and I spent the morning working in the yard and enjoying this cooler weather. As a reminder, this episode is brought to you by our sponsors, Ignite Management Services and Liberty Strength. These sponsors help me bring these shows to you each and every week, so I encourage you to click on their links below and check them out. Also, I want to encourage you to join us on our growing YouTube channel. Search for Deep Leadership on YouTube for videos of all my interviews and exclusive content. Well, that is it. Today we're going to be talking about how to lead with courage, and my guest is retired Air Force Colonel Kim Casey Campbell. Kim knows a thing about leading with courage. She has flown over 1,800 hours in the A-10 Warthog, including more than 100 combat missions protecting troops on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan. We sat down and talked about the fighter-pilot mindset and how to lead a team through a crisis. This was a fascinating conversation with someone who has led thousands of airmen, taught leadership at the Air Force Academy, and has been on the front lines of leadership. And I know you're going to love learning from Kim like I did. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Kim Casey Campbell. Kim is a retired Air Force colonel who served for over 24 years. She has flown over 1,800 hours in the A-10 Warthog, including more than 100 combat missions protecting troops on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2003, Kim was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism after successfully recovering her battle-damaged airplane after an intense close air support mission in Baghdad. She is the author of Flying in the Face of Fear, a fighter pilot's lessons on leading with courage. And I'm excited to have her on the show to learn from her experiences. So Kim, welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It is an honor to meet you, and it's an honor to hear your story. So I'm excited to have you on the show and just learn from your long career in the military, the leadership lessons you learned, and in some of the more adventurous parts of your career, of course, as well. We can't lose.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but first of all, tell us about your military career. Why did you join the Air Force in the first place? What drove you to become a fighter pilot? Because you have to have drive to want to do that particular job.
Yeah, it all started in the fifth grade. When I was 10 years old, I'll date myself, 1986, in school watching the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger. And I think many of us probably realize and remember where we were that day. For me, there was something like, I was super excited about the launch. It was just this exciting moment. There was going to be a teacher in space. And then watching really the tragedy play out in front of me, I mean, I was devastated. I didn't know any of the astronauts, but I felt like it touched me personally. And, I didn't quite understand it then, but talking with my parents, my mom, who was an oncology nurse, she, just sat and talked to me about, this idea that there are things in life that you're worth, that are worth risking your life for. There are things that are bigger and more important than yourself. And so at fifth grade, I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to be an astronaut. And my dad, he had spent some time in the Air Force. He was a graduate from the Air Force Academy. He listened to me say that. And he said, well, a lot of those, astronauts were pilots and many of them went to the Air Force Academy. That's something you might consider. I don't think he realized that I would just take it at face value. And so I was like, yep, that's what I'm going to do. And so 5th grade for me was like this switch. And I decided I was going to the Air Force Academy. I was going to be a fighter pilot and then ideally someday go on to become an astronaut. And so it started very young, a very young age for me. And I just became driven and everything for my parents became a whole lot easier because I would do my homework. I volunteered for all sorts of extracurricular activities. And it was a switch for me. I found my drive. I found this passion and this goal that I was going to go after.
Yeah. Angela Duckworth says grit is passion and perseverance. So when you have deep passion for something that you desire in your life, you're willing to go through anything. And going through the Air Force Academy, first of all, not easy, right? Going into, getting into the pilot program, getting through the pilot, all these were hurdles that you had to get through. But as you mentioned, you had a passion and you were willing to persevere through that to get to your ultimate dream.
Yeah. And there were moments of doubt. I mean, don't get me wrong. First off, I got a rejection letter from the Air Force Academy. After all that work and all that preparation, I got that rejection letter. And, that was devastating. And sometimes, that's the time where it feels easy to quit. It feels easy to give up on it. And thankfully, I was surrounded by people like my coaches and mentors and parents and teachers who just pushed me to go after it and keep after it. And, I eventually got my acceptance letter very close to the time where I was supposed to attend basic cadet training. And then even with flight school, I finally get to the academy. I perform well enough there to get a flight school slot. And then I get to pilot training and I struggle with air sickness for like the first 3 weeks. And it's again, this doubt of like, am I really meant to do this? And you kind of got to dig deep and go, yeah, this is what I want. And I'm willing to, take some, little punches along the way. But it was what I wanted. And even those challenges, if anything, they maybe propelled me more, gave me more drive and motivation to perform because I felt like I almost had to prove myself like I belonged. And, I just decided that's what I was going to do.
And you did. You persevered. So let's fast forward. I mentioned in the introduction, you had, so we had a war on. So Iraq, Afghanistan, you flew more than 100 combat missions, as I mentioned. You were awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism. Wow. What did you learn about yourself going into combat, going into these situations that you may not come back? You had a situation you almost didn't come back.
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself through that process?
I think sometimes we doubt ourselves a little bit, or for me, it really cemented this idea that sometimes we are more capable than we think we are, right? We're capable of doing these amazing, incredible things because of the work that we've put in. I feel like that moment, it's getting hit over Baghdad with a surface-to-air missile was not something I ever expected. That situation is just not in the realm of like, we talk about it, breathe brief to it, but it's kind of one of those things like, oh, that'll never happen to me, right? We're fighter pilots, we're invincible. But I feel like in that moment when it's every bit of training, all the hard things that you've done in your life lead you to this one moment. And I feel like, for me, that really reinforced this idea of, preparation and putting in the work because you never know when your moment is going to be. Now, ideally, it's not getting hit with a missile over Baghdad, but I think we all face those moments in our life where we're pushed to our limits. We're, everything, all the training, all the preparation, we have to have it all come together at one moment. And I think for me, having that happen early in my career was actually really beneficial because it taught me some incredible lessons about the preparation and everything that went into being prepared for kind of a worst case scenario.
Do you think it helped you be a better leader in the rest of your career as you had that, pretty, intense situation early in your career, as you mentioned, but, further on, you're leading a lot of people. How did that affect your leadership later on when you were faced with tough things as a leader, having that in your background? What did that do for you?
I think sometimes the more you do hard things, the better you become at doing hard things. And I think, I learned in that moment, when you're faced with a challenge, when you're faced with stress, when you're feeling overwhelmed. I mean, one, I learned the importance of having a good wingman, having somebody by your side to provide that mutual support. And I think that mutual support is critical in that moment over Baghdad for me, but I think it's critical in our personal and professional lives as well, that we have that one person that is going to have our back, that is going to hold us accountable, that's going to push us and encourage us. So that was one part of it. But the other thing for me is I had an exceptional leader during that deployment. I was a young wingman in the unit when we deployed to Iraq. And our leader was one that was really hard on us in terms of pushing us to be our best, because he knew we had to perform at our best to survive and then help our troops on the ground survive. But he cared so much about us. I mean, he really, you could feel it. And, he'd be the first one to give you a hard time if something didn't go quite right. He'd let you know about it, hold you accountable. But he was also the first person when we'd have a farewell or going away, we'd have to hand him the tissue box because he cared so much about the people on the team. I mean, it was this strength and warmth that came together in a very, very confident and competent leader.
Interesting. I hope leaders, you're listening to that, because that's something that, the best leaders in our lives, they leave an impact on our lives. And that's a leader that made an impact in your life for sure. Just hearing that story. And leaders who are listening in, are you making an impact on the people around you like that? To where there's a tissue box and when somebody leaves the company or what have you, that's give me chills just hearing that. So I love it. One of the things I was going to mention, you finished your military career. You headed up the Center for Character and Leadership Development at the Air Force Academy. So tell us what you did in that role, because this is an interesting thing, because you were at the Air Force Academy teaching leadership, or being responsible for making sure character and leadership development happens with the cadets. Tell us a little bit about that role.
Yeah, what a great opportunity to finish out my career. I mean, I started at the Air Force Academy. It very much felt like life coming full circle in many ways. And for me, I'd actually planned to retire. I had made the decision to retire, and I got a call about 10 days before my final out processing appointment where we separate. And it was the superintendent of the Air Force Academy asking if I would stay an extra year. And, I kind of laughed for a second. And he said, "I want you to be the director of the Center for Character and Leadership Development." And I was like, if there was one job in the Air Force that would, there was no doubt in my mind that I would stay. This is it, because I'm passionate about leadership and this idea of giving back to this next generation of leaders. I mean, it was just, there was no way I could say no. And, the opportunity to be around some amazing people and an incredible team that are experts in leadership and character development. I learned a lot about myself in that leadership role as well. But we are responsible for all 4,000 cadets, as well as faculty and staff, and the development of leaders of character. And that is our mission at the Air Force Academy, to develop leaders of character. We did that through a leader of character framework, and we really focused on helping develop these leaders so that, when the time comes, they're ready to go out there and lead our young men and women in service. We help them first, learn a little bit about themselves. We teach it in the format of live honorably, lift others, and elevate performance. And so we focus on kind of that personal, interpersonal level, leading teams and then leading organizations. And we give them the opportunity to practice. We give them the opportunity to make some mistakes and learn the hard way. But what an incredible opportunity. I'm thankful that I had that opportunity to go back and really serve the next generation of leaders.
That's fantastic. One of the things I thought when I was seeing that and I was preparing for this is, why do you think this is? I mean, I think the military does spend a lot of time emphasizing and teaching leadership to these, to young people, whether you're young enlisted, where you're getting more and more responsibility as you move up the chain, or these young officers coming out of the academy, coming out of our ROTC, they're coming in as, they're coming in as a second lieutenant, as an ensign there, and they're and they have to lead on day one. These young 24-year-old kid basically. Why do we think we place so much emphasis on leadership in the military, but we don't see the same focus in business schools? Just your thoughts on that. It's kind of something I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we understand. I think there's a strong emphasis on leadership because we know that leadership makes a difference on the battlefield. We know that a good leader can elevate the performance of a team. It only makes sense to me that in the business world, we do this as well. But sometimes I have found that there's this idea that either you've got it or you don't, that you're either going to be a good leader or you're not. And in my view, the reality is that we can all learn to be leaders. Yes, some people might be a more natural leader and it might come a little bit easier. But I'm a huge believer in that we have to give the people that work for us the opportunity to develop and grow. I mean, that is part of being a leader, is encouraging those people that maybe, are a little bit behind the power curve and helping them come up to speed and helping them, giving them some of those leadership skills and leadership opportunities when there is less threat. So I think it's this dichotomy. Sometimes we think that leadership isn't something that can be learned. And I think the opposite is true. And I think, for me, I've spent 24 years in the military and I feel like I still have more to learn. I still have this opportunity to learn and grow and develop as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, but business schools do a really good job on the hard skills, you learn accounting and marketing and operations and legal and all this stuff. But there's the soft skills of leadership that we don't emphasize enough. And, your example, you learn the hard skills of flying a fighter jet, but the soft skills of leading people. And you needed both to be successful in your job. And I think we can do both, is we can teach the hard skills and the soft skills as well. And they need to be brought together. Yeah, I think more and more.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've led teams. I mean, obviously, you got into a very senior role, a senior officer in the Air Force. You've led teams more than 1,000 people. What are some things that help you be successful as a leader?
It's funny, we were just talking about all this because it leads right in terms of how I thought I should be as a leader when I first started out, and then how I developed as a leader. And I think early on, I had this idea that, here I am, I'm, combat proven fighter pilot, right? Like I should have the answers. I should, I shouldn't have doubts. I shouldn't have uncertainties. We should go out, we should execute, kind of this tough exterior. And, what I realized over time is that is not what my young airmen wanted. My young airmen wanted to see me for who I was, the fact that, I'm not just a fighter pilot, I'm a leader and commander, but I'm also a mom, I'm a military spouse. These are all these different sides of me. And that is what allowed me to connect with my airmen more than anything else, just getting to know them on that human level, having that human level conversation, just really creating trust and building connections and getting to know people, find out where they, what they value, what's important to them, but also where they struggle, asking their ideas, bringing them into conversations, admitting that I don't have all the answers and I'm willing to listen and learn from my team. That to me was what over time I learned, sometimes the hard way with some feedback from some awesome chiefs, those senior level enlisted in the organization who are, willing to give you straightforward feedback. But I learned from my young airmen too, just in terms of what worked and what connected. I had the incredible opportunity to lead airmen throughout South America, Central America, and the Caribbean in a wide range of missions, and just getting to know them and learning from them. I mean, here I'm a fighter pilot, but I've got young airmen who are civil engineers and doctors and lawyers and air traffic control and logistics. I mean, that is not my area of expertise. Right. And so learning from them and walking around and, getting in the forklift and learning how to drive it, all of these things I think really help create connection on a team. And for me, that is probably the best thing that I learned as a leader and that I developed over time, was how to build trust and create connection. Credibility is important. It's got to be there. But how do you build that connection and create trust?
Yeah. That's how they're going to follow you. If they trust you. And I think you mentioned somewhere, maybe it was in the book or maybe I was reading on the website, vulnerability, the opportunity to say, I don't know, tell me, you're the expert here. Tell me what you think, and just being able to have that versus I have all the answers. I think that's that idea that you go to your people who are experts and you ask their opinion goes a long way for them saying, oh, wow, she's willing to listen to me. This, she's willing to hear my voice. This is a great leader,
That is absolutely what it's about, is, finding the experts on your team, find those subject matter experts, learn from them, get their ideas, get their input. And then, again, the responsibility is still yours as a leader to make that ultimate decision, but get that input from your team. And I learned that you don't have to have all the answers. You can be vulnerable. Even fighter pilots can be vulnerable.
In fighter pilots? Yeah. Oh my goodness. I got to talk to my old buddies. That's not what they told me. Well, your new book is called Flying in the Face of Fear of Fighter Pilots, Lessons on Leading with Courage. What was your motivation for getting this book into print?
Yeah, I never thought I was going to be an author. Like, it wasn't a goal of mine until I retired. And I realized looking back over the course of my career that so many people were willing to share stories with me, their experiences, their lessons learned. And it had a significant impact on me as a leader, as a pilot, as a parent. I just realized how important it was to share those stories. And I realized that when we have the courage to share those stories, to be vulnerable, right? To share the stories, the lessons learned, even if they expose mistakes or weaknesses, the challenges that go into it as well, that has the opportunity to help other people. It helps lift performance. And so for me, it was this idea of I'm pretty passionate about helping others and helping other people be vulnerable in their leadership growth. So how could I not write it? If this was an opportunity to share the stories and the experiences, the good and the bad, the challenges, the successes, the failures, the mistakes along the way. If that gives someone just a different perspective or a new way to look at things, whether you're a new leader or, you've been around for a while and just looking for a new way to look at things. So I decided to go for it and stuck to it. It wasn't a short process. It took me over 3 years to write, a year to publish. That was not my area of expertise either. But, now to have the book out and to hear the feedback and just the different people that it resonates with and connects with, it just makes all that hard work and all the writing so worthwhile.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Leadership skills are like any other skills. You need to practice them to get better at them. Best-selling leadership author John S. Rennie knows this. That's why he's written a new book called You Have the Watch. It's a guided journal for leaders designed to take you through an entire year of leadership training. By the end of the year, you will master 50 of the most important leadership skills. If you want to have a greater impact on the results and people in your organization, go to youhavethewatch.com and pick up your copy today.
This episode is brought to you by Ignite Management Services. Ignite is led by Mike Watson, who you might remember from episode 137. Mike and his team believe that everything starts with leadership, whether it's strategy execution or cultural transformation. It's the role of the leader to create the conditions for their people to succeed. The team at Ignite can help you develop critical habits to enhance your leadership capability and transform your business. Ignite Management is now offering the Resilient Leadership Assessment Tool. This is an online questionnaire designed to assess and guide leadership development, coaching, and team building. It provides leaders an opportunity to gain insights into their leadership strengths and development needs. After taking this assessment, you will receive a custom, detailed report that provides practical and actionable recommendations to enhance your effectiveness. I have taken this assessment myself and found it to be extremely valuable in helping me make changes to my leadership approach. Right now, Ignite is offering 15% off the price of this tool to the deep leadership audience. Go to ignitemanagement.ca and enter the code START15 at checkout to get started today. This episode is brought to you by Jeremy Clevenger at Liberty Strength. As a high-performing leader, you know that leadership isn't about telling people what to do, it's about leading by example. And for most people, the one area that they are lacking when it comes to leading by example is their health and fitness. By improving your health and fitness, every other area of your life improves. Your energy skyrockets, your sleep improves, your confidence increases, and more. But how can you get and stay fit as a busy leader? Well, you do what you've always done. You hire the best people for the job. Don't struggle on your own. Put Liberty Strength in your corner. Jeremy and his team will work with you to take your physique, mindset, nutritional habits, and more to the next level with his step-by-step, all-inclusive coaching program. I've worked with Liberty Strength for the past 2 years, and I'm in the best shape of my life, and I'm still hitting strength personal records at 56 years old. If you want to step up your game, reach out to Jeremy at libertystrengthtx.com to find out more and get your initial consultation scheduled with him today. The idea of
passing down these stories is really important. And I think the idea of putting it in a book, I always think you never know who's going to be impacted by this. You have a circle of influence that you think you know, but when you have a book that's out there, you create this bigger circle of influence, I think, than you realize. And I think that's why I think it's important that experienced leaders write down, lessons learned, things that they learn. I mean, there's been 15,000 books written on leadership, and I think there should be, 20,000. There should be 30,000. I mean, these are great for people to learn. We should learn throughout our career from the people who have gone before us. And
different books are going to resonate with different people. And, for me, as I wrote the book, I wanted to be certain that, these are not this is not the 100%, this has to be the way that you do it. At the end of each section, I included what I just call a considerations for leaders. It's consideration, something for you to think about. But there's so many different perspectives and ideas out there, and you really have to find what works for you. Be that authentic leader that is confident that, this is what works for me because it's true to who I am.
I love that. So what is and this was from the book, what is a fighter pilot mindset? I love this.
Yeah, it's for me, this fighter pilot mindset is something I've carried with me throughout my career, because to me, this fighter pilot mindset is instilled in us in a very young age, very early in our careers. And it is this desire to excel, right? This relentless pursuit of excellence, while also having the humility to know that you're not always going to get it right. And so it's striving for continuous improvement, always learning from those mistakes and failures along the way. We learn that really through the fighter pilot debrief, which is what we do after every combat mission, whether it's a success, a failure, or somewhere in between. We sit down and we debrief. We have that open, honest discussion where we check rank and ego at the door so that we can learn from each other. We talk about what we did well, maybe not spend a ton of time there. I think that is important as well. You talk about what you do well so you can repeat it. But then we really drill down into the mistakes and find the root cause, come up with those lessons learned, and then figure out what you'll do differently on the next mission. And then the key is you actually share those lessons with other people on the team. For me, that is what instilled this idea of it is okay to make mistakes and fail. We push ourselves in training specifically for that, but we have to pull out the lessons so that we don't continue to repeat those mistakes. It allows us to adapt in an evolving and complex environment. And for me, I have used that not just in aviation in the flying world, but I've used that throughout my roles in leadership as well. It has been highly effective in a way where we can sit down in a safe space to provide feedback, share lessons learned without the blame or shame.
What's interesting about what you say is, because I did, my time in the military, then I did 22 years in corporate running 8 different businesses. And one of the things I learned in corporate life was that we don't like to make mistakes. We don't want to make mistakes. Everything has to be perfect. And if there is a mistake, we hide it. We run from it. I talk about in my books, one of the things as a naval officer, you learn to run towards fires. A fire in a submarine is not a good thing. So you run towards it, not away from it. But I noticed in corporate, we ran away from all our problems. So we did just the opposite. And the thing is, you learn deeply from not just your successes, but your failures. And I think the military does a really good job of what I call controlled failure. So you fail, and then you have those opportunities to learn, especially as a young officer, when you're first learning these things, you have a chance to fail a lot and learn a lot from senior people next to you. And I think those lessons, because you fail, they're more deeply entrenched because you don't want to do that again. You don't want to be embarrassed by that. I really screwed that one up, And I think the lessons are deeper, I think, than if you whitewash or you don't talk about the failure. You're just like, you move on because you're embarrassed by it. But I think having those discussions, learning from your failures is a big part of becoming better at what you do.
Absolutely. It's critical. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't like to make mistakes. I don't like to fail, and it's still uncomfortable, but I also have learned over time through repeated learning that, some of the best lessons come from those failures and mistakes. You just have to have that right mindset.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. So this is an interesting question for someone who's been in your shoes. What techniques can you give us as leaders for staying calm under pressure? So leading our teams in crisis, leading our teams through a pandemic, or what have you, an economic downfall, or all these things that we face as business leaders, what are some techniques or some ideas that we can learn from a fighter pilot?
Yeah, it's I've seen some really calming influences over time, flying A-10s in combat. And, it's amazing when there's chaos all around you and things feel like they're going wrong. That soothing voice over the radio to just say, we've got you, we've got this, and here's our plan, and here's what we're going to do. I've been on the receiving end of that, and I've also been on the other end where I've got ground troops screaming for support, and I'm just trying to be as calm and composed as I can. And even though my mind and heart is racing inside, I'm just trying to be calm and composed for them to let them know that we've got it. We've got a plan and we're going to execute. One of the things that's really worked for me is this technique that we learned early in our training, and it just helps us prioritize under pressure, prioritize during an emergency. And it's not just military aviation, it's civilian aviation as well, but it's aviate, navigate, communicate. And aviate means we focus on what is most important first. In the air, that's flying the airplane. In life, it's what is that one thing that you have to keep doing? What is that mission that you can't stop doing or you will fail? And then you can take that next step and navigate. Where are you going to go? If you have an emergency, what's your next step? Where is that direction? Where are you going to go? Well, in a crisis, it's important to know where we're going to go as well. We need to have a clear path for our team. We need to also understand the threats and the risks to our team and the mission. Similar in the air. And then we can take it to that next step, which is communicate. And communicate in the air now is reaching out for help, either to your wingman to let them know what happened. You can communicate to others to let them know that you need help, to let them know your plan. And I think the same applies in a crisis, probably perhaps more important in a crisis is just that communication of letting your team know the plan and reaching out if you need help. But it just helps me kind of focus, okay, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, in the pandemic, for example, when there's so many things going on around us, there's all these things going wrong. What can I control? What is most important? How can I center up and let some of these other things go? Easier said than done. But how do I center up and focus on what is most important? And then I can take that next step.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You mentioned this idea of being a calm influence too. And I think if we panic as a leader, I think we need to be vulnerable, we need to be authentic, but we also can't be panicking, because I think our mood is contagious. And so I think if we panic, everybody panics. So the idea of being calm in a crisis, but, again, I think I like the idea of setting your priorities. And I think, aviate, navigate, communicate, these resonate really well for business as well. So.
Yeah. And I think, it's this idea that you can say, this is a serious situation. There is a lot going on right now, but you can say it in a very calm way. And ideally, you've had some time to take that deep breath, take a step back and kind of come up with your plan of action. But even in the moment, if you're, suddenly faced with all of these things, you can just still remember that calm, take a deep breath. And sometimes the best thing we can do in the chaos is nothing. We can take that step back, take some time to think. Granted, it's situation dependent, but sometimes the best thing is to do nothing and just take some time to assess the situation and then take appropriate action.
Great. I love that. So switch gears a little bit. What is a wingman culture? We mentioned wingman a lot. Wingman is the person that's next to you, right? What is a wingman culture and how can we use that in our organizations?
Yeah, so I think we're all familiar with the wingman now because everybody's seen Top Gun.
Right. A Navy movie, by the way.
Yes, I know. And one the Air Force should have taken a long time ago.
I know.
Different story. And Navy did well with that. The wingman is the person that has your six, right? The area behind you can't see. A wingman has a different perspective. They're looking out for threats. They're looking out for things that maybe you can't see because you're focused on what's in front of you. You're focused on navigating. You're focused on finding the target and getting to the target. A wingman has your back. A wingman sees those things from a different perspective. A wingman also knows the role that they play. They know where they fit into the bigger picture. They know the specific role that they play on the team, and they understand that their individual performance is critical for the team's success. So this idea of a wingman culture on a team in any organization is, does everybody on the team understand the role that they play and how do they fit into the bigger picture? And we understand that we can push each other, we hold each other accountable, because when we lift each other's performance, it elevates the performance of the team. It's this idea of interdependence where we all are relying on each other to perform at their best. But it also is this encouraging idea of we know we're going to work together. We're going to support each other. We're going to push each other to be at their best, but we're going to encourage and support along the way as well. And I think, it's built on trust. It's built on trust. And it is also built on a common and shared purpose. And when you have that, now you can help everybody better understand the role that they play, where they fit in, and trust that we are going to hold each other accountable. We're going to have our back. We're going to check 6 when we need it in order to elevate the performance of a team.
Yeah, I think if you, I think we operate, any of us in anything that we do, if we know someone has our back, it just gives you a different perspective, right? And I think sometimes there's cultures, I've worked in company cultures where you felt like no one had your back, like everyone was looking to put a knife in your back. And so it was one of those cultures where it was not, you were very guarded in everything you did. But when you're in an environment where everybody has your back, you have a team, you can depend on each other, you have each other's back, then I think you're going to push for much higher levels of performance than that. You're not always just protecting yourself. You're willing to stretch because you know someone's there to back you up.
Yeah, the performance is higher and hopefully you're happier and you enjoy work more because you're around a team that supports you and has your back. I think people stay on teams when they like their team, right? When they feel valued and respected and supportive, they stay. When you don't feel that way, you're more likely to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have another question for you. Okay, first of all, the A-10 is an amazing aircraft, and it's the coolest aircraft out there. And so
I think so. I mean, I'm totally biased, but
you're a badass fighter pilot. I just have to say that. So one of the things I was going to ask you, you were super successful in a field that's dominated by men. I mean, men typically over time have been these fighter pilots, but you went in there and you were very successful in what you did. Moving up to the rank of colonel. So you clearly, mastered your craft and you were excellent at what you did. What are some strategies that female leaders need to employ to kind of overcome some of the challenges of working in male-dominated environments? I work in the manufacturing world. I work in, we make products for electric utilities. You go to trade shows, it's all men, right? Yeah. So, but there's a lot of women that are doing really well in our industry. So what are some strategies maybe for how does a female leader overcome some of those challenges of being in a male-dominated?
Yeah, and I guess I would say also, don't get me wrong in this. Like, I had my doubts going in. I had my uncertainties and fears and a lot of pressure that I put on myself. I mean, when I went into my very first fighter squadron, I think there was something like 35 female fighter pilots in the entire Air Force out of about 3,500. So the numbers were small. I knew I was going to be the only woman. And there was part of me that just put so much pressure on myself. Like, I felt like if I made a mistake or failed in any way, that I was going to ruin it for all the women that followed me. And that is a ton of pressure. It's a ton of pressure that I put on myself. What I realized and how I learned these things was I walked into that fighter squadron and I was on a mission to be credible. I wanted to be the best fighter pilot that I could be. And I worked hard. I was in the books. I was in the vault learning about all, the classified systems. I just spent a lot of time working my way up to be very credible in the airplane. So to me, that was number one. And I realized that the guys in my squadron, many of them I knew from the Air Force Academy as well, but to them, they just wanted to see that I was credible and capable on the airplane. That was the number one thing to them. And, the jet doesn't know. The jet doesn't care about who's flying the airplane. And so for me, it was just kind of overcoming that initial fear, doubt, uncertainty, and the pressure that I put on myself. But that came through with credibility. So to me, that's number one. But I also think it's important to find your wingmen, right? To find your allies. Who are those people that are going to have your back, that are going to support you and speak up for you? I mean, how nice does it feel if there is a comment made or something that may be a little bit negative, to have somebody else stand up for you? I mean, you could think about this on the school playground, right? Instead of standing up for yourself, there's people around you that will stand up for you. That is so nice. And to have that support network, ideally within your team, but if not, then find it elsewhere. For me, being the only woman in my fighter squadron, I had these amazing brothers on my team who supported me and believed in me, who had my back. But I also found support if you will, outside of my fighter squadron and finding other women that were in the same unique position. And then we really could talk about some of those struggles and doubts and fears that we had. So I think finding your wingman is important. And then I also believe very strongly that everybody on a team has their own unique voice and perspective. Whatever it is, we all bring something to the table. So it's a little reminder, and again, sometimes easier said than done, to have courage to speak up. When you're sitting around the table and, if you're the only woman in the room, you provide a unique perspective. And so it's having that courage to speak up and be confident because you've done the work. You've put in the work. You've done the training. You've done the preparation. You are credible and capable. People need to hear, and the team will perform better when they have those different perspectives and ideas. So sometimes it's taking that little bit of a shift in perspective of when you have the doubts and uncertainties, it's not about you, it's about the team and what you can offer the team.
Powerful advice. And I hope that those listening in that are maybe a female leader in a male-dominated world, these are some really great lessons, and it works. And I think I've interviewed some of the first female submariners, submarine officers. I've had a couple on the show, and one of the things I realized is that they had to do everything I had to do, right, and they had to deal with being the first of something. Like one of them mentioned she would walk down like a hallway on the submarine, and everybody had been trained that there's going to be females coming on board, and the men didn't know what to do, so they were all like bracing against the bulkhead, thinking. And she's like, "No, I'm just a person. You don't need to do that." So not only you had to do the difficult work of being competent in your craft, but also dealing with people getting used to like someone who a woman who's never been in this role before now is in these roles. I think it made it much more difficult. And so my respect for them and what they had to go through was just through the roof, because you had to do everything I had to do, which is really hard, and you had to deal with that as well. So I think it's twice as hard, and I think those are great lessons that we can learn from that. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
What final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
Well, I think I go back to this idea of really what it comes down to is we all have fear in our lives, right? And sometimes we don't want to admit it, right? We face doubts, we have uncertainties. We don't like to admit that we maybe don't have it all together all the time. And I think as I look back on my career, there were many times where I kind of had that real excitement for something, but also just a nervousness about not meeting expectations or, not living up to these expectations that I put on myself. It's the fear of failure. And sometimes that fear can drive us in the wrong direction, but it is all about what we do in those moments. I think back to the days that I walked up the ramp at the Air Force Academy for basic cadet training. I think about walking into my first fighter squadron. I think about taking command of my first unit. I think about these moments as a parent deploying for the first time with kids at home, or having my husband deploy and I stayed home. Like all of these moments, there were doubts, there were uncertainties, and there were fears. And sometimes I was afraid to admit it, probably many times. The truth is we all face fears in our lives, right? It is this fear of failure, fear of not meeting expectations. Those are normal feelings. Those are normal responses. And it is really what we do with it. It is about having the courage when you feel the doubt and uncertainty to get up and do it anyway. That is what's most important. And for some reason, we are so hard on ourselves so much of the time. And if we would just give ourselves a little bit of grace and recognize that you can't actually have courage without some fear. So don't let the fear get you. Take action and do it anyway.
I love that. So powerful. I love that lesson. Kim, this has been fantastic. Again, listeners, I highly encourage you. The book is called Flying in the Face of Fear. If you really want to dig in deep and learn a little bit more about what that's like to be fighter pilot, be in these combat missions, be in the, be sitting with Kim and learning and from her experiences, I really highly encourage you to check out this book. And so how can our listeners find out more about you and this new book?
Yeah, best way is to go to my website, which is kim-kc-campbell.com. There are a lot of Kim Campbells out there. So the KC is my call sign. So that helps at least distinguish a little bit. But my website, and then the book is available, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever your favorite local bookseller is as well. And also, I would just say reach out on LinkedIn. I love to hear from people that have listened to the podcast, who hears it and maybe has a question that we didn't get to. So I would love for you to reach out and connect with me on social media as well.
I love that. We're going to put links in the show notes for all of those resources. Again, I highly encourage you to check out Kim's book, connect with her on LinkedIn, go on her website. There's a lot of great stuff on her website. I highly encourage you to do it. So follow the links below here in the show notes. Kim, I want to thank you for coming on the show and really sharing your unique perspective on leadership and the lessons you learned throughout your long Air Force career. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Welcome to the Reverie Channel, where entertainment knows no bounds. Live concerts, on-demand music, documentaries, and short films, all in stunning HD. Now on Roku TV, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Immerse yourself from home. And on Android and iOS for those on the move. Support creators with crowdfunding donations. Fuel their creativity. Join us in shaping entertainment's future. The Reverie Channel, where every view, every donation matters.
Are you a fan of classic cinema or a young person who wants to discover the best films of all time? Do these legendary movies still hold up?
On the Generation Film podcast, two guys who grew up when movies dominated the culture share a great film with a panel of young movie lovers and see how it plays for today's generation.
We discuss changes in storytelling styles, representation,
The making of each film, its initial reception, and how its meaning has changed over the years.
Join us as we explore cinema classics across generations on Generation Film.
Electric acid.